All right, shall we get underway? I'm aware that others may be coming on in, and I'm aware that some of you are joining us online, and I'm glad to see you all here this morning for this update on our future church. And to begin where we begin, which is that St. Columba's is a church on a mission to live God's love. And as we strive to realize and live into that vision, we're ready to launch some exciting ideas. A new plan for our church property that is forged from the ambitious ideas of parishioners and the ingenuity of our staff and the hard work of our master planning committee. And in celebration of our 150th anniversary this year, we want to do some adjustments to rework our building to accommodate this thriving and energetic congregation as it is today, while creating some new infrastructure that helps address our city's housing crisis, laying a solid financial foundation for the future, and tackling one of the toughest lessons in our legacy. And this morning, for our presentation, I'm going to give a broad overview, and then Elizabeth Taylor and Steve Smith, who have been co-chairing our master planning committee, will share some more detail, and then we'd like to hear your thoughts today or in weeks to come. So we want to build something here that's going to last for decades, just as our forebears built this place that has served for these decades past. Our physical building needs some upgrading to accommodate the diverse, lively congregation that we are today, and we have a growing community online. So the past, present, and future of St. Columba's all is part of our thinking and the beloved community that we seek to create here together. To get here, we have listened to parishioners and to neighbors who have constructively critiqued and commented on our plans. We first invited everyone to contribute ideas, asked ministry leaders, asked you, asked staff, their ideas from the church, and then in the fall of 2023, this past October, we opened those ideas to comment. We heard from you, and the feedback we heard was rich and helpful with many different, sometimes divergent views. We have heard you. We've made some adjustments. We have scaled back on the number of housing units that we envisage for our site. We have removed some of the ideas that you told us were less compelling for the life of our congregation. And we've added some elements that we believe will help welcome newcomers and improve our accessibility and our ability to engage beyond the church itself. We've also looked around at many churches in DC and elsewhere who are looking at ways to use their properties most effectively. I'm going to cover briefly 4 mission-based priorities. The first is that we want to do some work and reconfigure our existing property to use our space most effectively in support of our mission. And in that, we have a mix of some necessary repairs and upgrades. At every place, we're looking to improve accessibility, and we're looking to support our current ministries and to lay the groundwork to support future generations. So these plans, and you'll hear more about this in just a moment, but our plans include some absolutely essential improvements to our primary entrances here on Albemarle and on Butterworth, to enable greater accessibility. And both of these entrances are suffering from failing iron and concrete. We're going to do some modest updates in the common, where we all gather, some internal changes to what's called the music wing on this floor, out that doorway over there, and to the second floor on the Butterworth side, where our youth ministries gather and our water ministry operates during the weekdays, and others gather there. Some improvements to the Great Hall, not the structure itself, but lighting, sound, technology for our own use and for the use of many outside groups, which it's a very appealing space. Upgrades to the kitchen on this floor, the big kitchen that feeds us and feeds visitors. Improving accessibility to our bathrooms, particularly here and there. And throughout, upgrades to technology so that we can meet in a variety of ways and share in worship with those who are both near and far. Separately, the nursery school has already got plans underway and is replacing the playground equipment, and that's going to happen this summer. It's just lived its life and needs to be replaced. And these changes come from proposals from staff, from leaders of ministries, from clergy, parishioners, and all of the things that we're thinking of align with our mission and our values. So we're excited about these and what these possibilities would open up for us. Second, we want to use the site at Fletcher House, which, if you're unfamiliar, is the house on the corner of 42nd and Butterworth. And we intend to, in place of that existing house, we intend to construct a building that would consist of 8 3-bedroom townhouses for sale as condos. And as currently conceived, there would be 4 units of what we might call workforce housing, meant to be affordable for families who are earning between 50 to 80% of what's called AMI, average median income. So this is public school teachers, police officers, nurses, and the like. 2 units of market rate housing, and 2 units that the church would retain for our own uses, potentially for a member of the staff, potentially for in support of our refugee response ministry. So that's what's conceived in this planning effort. We're partnering with Manna Homes. They're a DC-based nonprofit with 40 years of experience in developing affordable housing and helping others do that as well. As you likely know, home ownership in a high opportunity community is exceedingly difficult without generational or family wealth. So for St. Columba's to construct some mixed income housing on our own property would be a generational game changer for some number of families that could live there. It would also be a meaningful step toward acknowledging and repairing some of our own history, which we have coming to learn has some racist inflections in it, and in a way that contributes directly to our congregation's strategic priorities. We're also contemplating that we would create a fund that would help support those seeking first-time home ownership. Our plans are not all focused on construction as part of this 150th. We believe this is a moment for our third goal, which is to underpin our future by building an endowment for St. Columba's. Unlike many other older churches, we do not have such a financial basis for our work, and we live very much from year to year without reserves for large repair and replacement needs, and having more settled finances would allow us to focus more on doing what we do for others. And while we raise money for the church of today and the community that will live in our neighborhood in the future, we can't ignore the past. St. Columba's parish history is entangled with slavery and with a racist removal of people of color from our neighborhood in ways that we are only now coming to understand. And our fourth item is that we believe we need to consider acting to address some of these past harms. We cannot look to the future with new construction on this site without considering how we got where we are and to whom we owe a debt of contrition. Our commitment to become an anti-racist church inspires us to look at possibilities for reparations. As a congregation, we have some shared values about justice and about the dignity of every human being. The conversation about how best to act on these values is ongoing. So with guidance from St. Columba's Anti-Racism Task Force, the vestry is now affirming principles and criteria for action steps that we might take. More on this to come in the future. All of these things that I've been speaking about will entail a significant fundraising effort. The church will have more to say about this later, and specifically about costs and how we'll approach them. But for now, what I would say about this is that the overall costs for the work that I laid out for our existing building are estimated at somewhere between $10 to $12 million, depending upon which projects we include in this. The cost of the Fletcher House project, as envisioned and mapped out, would be perhaps another $500,000 after recognizing proceeds from the sales of the units we construct and assuming that the church retains 2 of them for our use. And these numbers, these estimates, are subject to revision as we work further on the project. We are looking at that, we, the vestry, and Master Planning Committee, looking at that in these days. And we do anticipate that we would be launching a campaign later this year to celebrate our 150th anniversary and to underpin our vision with some solid resources. So what's next is that we want to hear back from you on what I've laid out, and you're going to hear some more. We want to hear back from you, from neighbors, and from members of the church as our plans take more final shape. We believe that the options we've outlined, after listening and studying and dreaming and praying, we believe these are the right ones for us to do at this time, to honor our past, to support our present, and to build an essential foundation for our future. We believe that the right things, we're interested to hear from you about how best to achieve them. And we're going to be talking to neighbors in the community again and listening. We'll be setting out more details. There's still work to be done, but we are farther down the road. If you have comments and you're going to hear specifics about, and it's been publicized, about dates when you can gather, but you can also simply email our future church at columba.org. At this 150th anniversary, our sights are on the past, present, and future, and our longer-term goal is not just to use our resources wisely and improve our infrastructure, but to build something that's vital, that's new, and buildings are only as important as what happens inside them and around them. We're a church that is blessed to be thriving and healthy, working for justice, caring for the environment, engaging children and people of all ages, welcoming our congregation with music and worship. And this is our vision, to build the beloved community here in our place, and time. Let me hand this over to Elizabeth and Steve to fill in some more. Elizabeth and Steve and Ralph. Yes, it is on and...
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to have this conversation. Steve and I are going to walk you through a few more details, but basically cover the same ground that Ledlie has covered. We want to make sure that we leave time for you to ask us questions. You've got the printed out slide deck. I think it's available in the Common. It will also be available on the website, so we're not going to read you every slide, but you have access to this deck. And I also just want to thank Ralph Cunningham, and I also want to thank Andy Brown and Nate Hammond. The three of them have done so much work that has enabled this plan to come together. One of the members of the Master Planning Committee went to a meeting of the Faith-Based Development Initiative Group. This is a group of churches in the area who are, like us, thinking about using their space to build affordable housing. And she came back and she said, it was so moving to see what these other churches are trying to do, and they don't have, as parishioners, an architect, a developer, builder. You just have no idea how much time these experts have put into doing this work. So I just want to say thank you.
And I was with Elizabeth the other day, and her husband suggested that maybe she was up for sainthood. And she and Steve, and that sounded about right. So thank you, Elizabeth and Steve.
Thank you. So Steve's going to go first and walk you through this first set of slides, and then I'll come back.
Good morning. So excited to talk with you at this point of this project. This has been 4 years of my life, and so I feel like we're seeing the finish line, at least for this stage. There are a lot of slides here. As Elizabeth said, we've printed out a deck that you can take with you. I'm sure it'll be available for download from the website. There's a lot of detail in that, and I would encourage you to read that in your own time. I'm not going to read it to you. What I want to do is try to simplify what you're seeing, because there are a number of pages here that describe 9 projects within the scope of the existing building. Elizabeth will talk separately about the Fletcher House site. But I think it would be helpful maybe to just consider those 9 projects as really 3 things. The first is reconfiguring the entrances on the Albemarle and Butterworth sides of the building. And I'll talk about what we mean by reconfiguring and what's going into that development, why we think it's important. But that's one significant piece of work, and it's a significant part of the budget for this project if it moves forward. The second is improved program space specifically for youth and the water ministry. And a lot of thought, a lot of input has come into the Master Planning Committee over these years about the need for thinking differently about that space. We were able to identify space within the building that allows us to better meet the needs of those ministries, but it's going to take some work to get that space ready. So that's the second piece. And then the third thing is everything else. Sort of a bucket of additional improvements, technology upgrades, refreshes, cosmetic kinds of changes to the building that just make it a more welcoming place. So that's why you see 9 different pages here of detail, and all of those bullets go into some additional depth about what those are. We then grouped those into specific recommendations to vestry, because if any of you have ever gone through a home improvement project in your house, as soon as you touch this wall, then you need to touch this other thing and this other thing. So we tried to group those into logical pieces from a construction standpoint. But I want to go back to those 3 themes: the entrances, the program space, and then miscellaneous improvements. Now, the entrances, Ledlie said this very gently, that there are some structural issues on both sides of the building. The steel and concrete that we walk up is deteriorating. It will need to be replaced. There's a significant cost to doing that just to replace what we have. but the design also has some deficiencies. As you've probably experienced from the Albemarle side of the building, it's a steep climb. You're coming up a hill, then you face this kind of daunting staircase to get into the main entrance of the building. If you're looking for the offices and you're not familiar with the building, you have to know the secret handshake to find the door. So we worked with, at Ralph's recommendation, a great architectural firm called Barnes Vance, who developed a really lovely concept to replace the exterior stair with a 2-story vestibule on the Albemarle Street side that moves the entrance to the offices closer to the street, so it's obvious that that's the entrance to the offices. It has a sort of transparent view into the building, so it's very welcoming. People who are walking by who may not be familiar with what happens inside, who might want to take a look. And so I really think that the importance of the entrances is that they represent how we face the community, in addition to how we get into the building. And I think about my mom, who enjoys coming here every Christmas, who's 80, who has some mobility challenges. Getting into this building with a walker is not the easiest thing in the world. So we want to make that easier. The 2-story vestibule on Albemarle and a 2-story vestibule on Butterworth would each have an elevator. They'd each have interior stairs. So when it rains or snows, you wouldn't have concerns about people slipping. And they would just look a lot better and a lot more welcoming. So there are important projects, and particularly on the Albemarle side, there's a lot of implications for that in terms of the site plan. So there'd be a number of changes, all preserving work that's already been done. So the labyrinth is actually a piece of the puzzle. It's already there. But we'd be able to build a really lovely, gentle stair that would come up and sort of wrap the labyrinth, but also deal with the grade issues that approach the building so that you could come in at grade from the sidewalk. So that's part one, and there's 4 pages of detail about that. The second, program space. So when we started this project, we weren't sure that there was enough space in the building to address the input that we'd gotten from the water ministry and from youth. Building new space is expensive. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we really did the work to figure out, do we really need more square footage, or do we just need to better use the square footage that we have? And there were some stories or some legacy about some of the existing building and what could or couldn't happen with the existing building based on how it was constructed. And with Ralph's help and the help of a structural engineer, we were able to wrestle to the ground some of those assumptions. And the good news is that there's a bunch of space on the Butterworth side of the building, 2nd floor, that's relatively underutilized, that's chopped up into smaller spaces that are kind of unattractive, that today are divided up by concrete walls that we were concerned might be structural. Most of them aren't. So the good news, based on that evaluation, is that we can remove a number of those walls, and we can create a lovely open space on the Butterworth side, 2nd floor. Considerably less expensive than it would have been to build new space, and it doesn't cause us additional costs for maintaining and providing utilities to new space. We can just get better usage out of the space we have. And the 2 main priorities for that space would be space for youth and space for water ministry, so that folks involved in the water ministry and our guests feel more welcome and more secure, and that participants in the youth ministry feel like they have space of their own, that they can call their own in the building. And then the third bucket are all of these miscellaneous improvements. And as Ledlie has mentioned a number of times, we have an online congregation for this church that's bigger than the average Episcopal congregation nationally. And that congregation is growing. And so we have an opportunity to think about how do we better connect the folks who aren't physically with us every Sunday into the work of this church. And so that is some of the investment that we're talking about. We also have a lot of people who use this building who have not necessarily a membership relationship with the church, but they feel like the church is an important part of the community. How do we make the building more welcoming to folks who aren't necessarily members today, but could be? And so we've put a number of different priorities into those buckets. It involves upgrading the kitchen so that it could be a certified commercial kitchen. It involves some cosmetic changes to the Great Hall so that you can close off the Great Hall space and still have access straight through the building from Albemarle to Butterworth. And it involves replacing the restrooms, because I mentioned the two entrances, the two vestibules that we talked about having elevators in both sides, allows us to remove the elevator that currently gives us very little space to maneuver for restrooms behind the Great Hall. So once that elevator comes out, we have a lot more space there. We can create accessible restrooms. And we also deal with an elevator that's nearing end of life anyway. So all of that comes together pretty well in terms of a set of improvements. And as you can see, we set that up as 6 recommendations to the vestry. So appreciate your consideration of that, and we're happy to take questions. I just thought it would be helpful to kind of understand a little bit about how we were thinking about it rather than just read you bullets on the slides. And with that, I'd love to hand over to Elizabeth, who will take us through the Fletcher House portion of the project.
Do people want to ask questions now about the existing building before we turn to the Fletcher House building, or do you want me to keep going? And yeah, let's go ahead and take questions about the existing building.
If you do, please walk to the microphone and use the microphone, because this is being recorded, and that way people aren't left out.
I've heard a number of specific objectives mentioned, such as accessibility, the youth program, the community, the neighborhood, and the water ministry. But one thing I have not heard is anything about environmental sustainability and stewardship. And there were several paragraphs devoted to that in the vision that was put out a year ago or so. So I'm a little concerned that I don't hear anything about that. And in particular, I'm talking about promoting zero waste, infrastructure, facilities that are built in to promote zero waste, and also to reduce our energy consumption. I don't know if you're familiar with the building energy performance standards that the district has adopted. And don't believe it applies to churches at this time, but it might in the future. And those are pretty strict and require reductions in energy consumption aimed at reducing the use of fossil fuels. So, for example, the design of the kitchen might have to include switching from gas stoves to electric induction and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you brought that up. Yes, we will be as green as we can be in the building. We're not at the point now where we're designing specifics, but yes, we have a commitment to the environment. I actually worked some with the Environment Committee as we were putting this plan together. Karen Abrams was really helpful in offering ideas. We had talked about whether there might be DC money that could help to add more skylights, and it turns out probably not, but we are in touch with the Environment Committee, and some of what you're talking about can be done through the regular operations, our commitment to reducing waste and all that. But yes, thank you. It's not written in there as a specific project, but it is an overarching commitment. So thank you. Anybody else, or shall I go on to Fletcher House? You can come back to questions about the building if you want. So Ledlie told you the basic plan. I'll just say that the Fletcher House idea, or the replacement of Fletcher House, we call it Fletcher House just because that's a handy way to refer to it, has been modified in response to feedback. In particular, we heard that the real need in housing is for family housing. And so these are designed as 3-bedroom townhouses. So they're family townhouses. And it will be it'll be connected by a condominium agreement, but we're calling them townhouses because the way that they would be constructed, there wouldn't be a lot of interior common space that somebody would have to maintain. Everybody would they'd have individual accesses to each of the units that we're referring to as townhouses. We're very excited about the idea of retaining 2 of them for St. Columba's use. I went through the survey responses, and there was just unanimous enthusiasm for retaining a unit for a St. Columba's staff member and for a refugee family or another use like that. As Ledlie said, the dollars to be able to retain 2 of them, right now the way we're looking at it would be about $500,000 to be able to retain 2 of those townhouses. So we'll see how that goes. But you know, we're doing our very best to calculate what the cost of building will be when we get around to breaking ground, which is, you know, several years in the future, how much we'll be able to sell the market rate townhouses for and all that. But right now, that's how the numbers are playing out. We heard concerns about parking, and we haven't fixed that problem, but we are working on that problem, including Steve's been in touch with Iona about possibly using some space there. We're exploring other options. You know, as you know, we're close to the metro, so you don't have to have a car if you live here. And then, you know, we've reduced the number down to 8 units, so it shouldn't be, the impact on parking in the neighborhood should not be too great. Just so to orient you, can everybody read the, right there? That says housing. That's the plan for the new space. And the architects and Ralph have worked on integrating the new space with the new entrance to Butterworth, so it's all of a piece. And this is just a different view of the same, you're looking at 2 townhouses right there. So this is just about the overall cost of the construction. Ledlie didn't say this, but we worked with a company called Axios to come up with the cost of the existing space. For the Fletcher House space, Nate and Andy and Ralph and our architects have put their heads together to give us the numbers. So I mostly wanted to, and I mostly just repeated what Ledlie said, so I wanted to be able to answer your questions and hear your thoughts and your enthusiasm for these ideas. You know, as Ledlie said, it would be so important to be able to offer 4 units of workforce housing. It's only 4 units, but it is 4 units. It's 4 families who could afford to live in this neighborhood. And there are a lot of other faith-based organizations that are thinking along these same lines. It would be a really important step for St. Columba's to say, we are doing this, and it works, and they're going to be, and these families will be very much vital parts of our community. So if everybody does a little something, it will make a difference. One question that we were asked, you know, in the fall was, you know, should churches be in the business of developing housing? Churches all over the country are in the business of developing housing. In our neighborhood, you may have read in the Washington Post that Montgomery County is looking at new rules to allow houses of worship to develop this kind of housing. Bob Brooksmith just sent us an online conversation that's being had in New York City about faith-based organizations developing affordable housing. So we are in good company with the thinking that we are doing, and we have this asset. This is, we can do something really good with this space that we have. So, you know, that's the vision, is to try to do something good for the community, for people who need housing, and also for St. Columbus. I mean, so we're excited about it. I hope you're excited about it. I'm ready to hear your questions.
On any of the topics presented, I think.
Yes, on any of the topics.
Thank you all for this very exciting vision. I know so much work has gone into it. I'm curious about the $500,000 figure associated with the townhouses. I'm not sure what that represents, because I see there's a $12 million cost around construction, et cetera. I wonder if you could just clarify that a little bit.
So we're going to try to pay for most of this by selling the 2 market-based units. So that's the $500,000 is just sort of what's left over after we put in the money that we will raise. And just to be clear, there is DC money that is available for both to defray the cost of this kind of building and to help to pay for mortgages. Our current plans don't assume DC money because you can't guarantee it. We will certainly try to get it. Anything you want to add to that? Okay. Yes, Elizabeth.
A comment, not a question. I just wanted to say that, first of all, this is so exciting, and thank you so much for all the work you've done on this. And I think St. Columba's really can be a leader in this regard. And my comment is that a lot of people may not recognize that building affordable homes for home ownership is kind of an unfilled niche right now in the market. That a lot of affordable housing that's built is built for the rental market, and that's incredibly important. But there are also residents of our city who could conceivably get into the homeownership market, but the barriers to being able to do so are pretty high. And so this fits a real need within the city. You can't do it at the same scale as rental, which is part of the reason that rentals often dominate the conversations, but it fills a real need. So thank you for being creative about that and thinking about how we can best integrate this.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate that.
I just want to say ditto to what Elizabeth said. This is unbelievably exciting, and I know there's a lot of expertise in the parish, which would maybe another discussion session specifically on this at a later point would be helpful, because we can't cover everything today. The one question I had is whether it's been thought about, if we engage more philanthropic capital to underwrite the project, would we be able to stretch a little further in terms of the affordable units? But maybe all of that has been part of the calculations.
We would love to do that. And yes, that is a possibility.
Thank you very much for all of your stupendous work. This is not easy to do. Excuse me. Sorry. I can do it without the mic if I need to. My question is, when I first joined this parish, Fletcher House was Iona House. And it has had, and this parish has had a very long history. It was in fact a founding parish of Iona House across the street from us all those years ago. I wonder what, if any, conversations have been had besides parking spaces with Iona about any potential use Iona might have of one of the spaces, or may purchase one of them. Iona Senior Services is a leader in the nation, particularly around dementia issues for older adults, especially those who are unhoused. And I wondered if anyone in this parish had spent any time with anyone at Iona or anyone on the board there to discuss the possibility that Iona House could then come some full circle in some very small, given your plan, way to address the issue that we have an aging population, not only in this district, but in the nation, and that we have a leader next door who might be able to do that. I know there have been some conversations which didn't bear fruit, but I just wondered what those might be and if there's any possibility for any small opening for all of us, all the individuals who will be older, especially after 2025. I think over 20% of the population will be over 60.
Thank you, Judith. And yes, I have been in conversation with the executive director of Iona. They actually approached us. They're celebrating an anniversary. Would it be their 50th, I think? They wondered about buying the property outright, and that didn't feel like the right path for us to take. But it's interesting to hear your question. It prompts me to think, I wonder if they would be interested in a partnership or purchase of one or more of the units in some way. That's a thank you for that. I will follow that up with June. So thank you for that suggestion.
Hi. I also commend everyone for tremendous amount of work that's been put into this, and wanted to echo Jan's comments about philanthropy. If we are the developer until the sale, there's going to be some financing packages clearly will be needed. It's a big undertaking. I also wanted to mention, as we're thinking of spending a lot of funds, to keep in mind supplier diversity as some of our dollars go to work. Think about suppliers in the city, people, businesses, entrepreneurs. If we have some equitable RFP processes, if we are selecting a developer to work with us, there are a lot of developers in the city who I'm sure would be eager for that work.
Thank you. That's a really terrific suggestion. Hang on a second. Do you want to say more about the way the numbers work? A couple of people have asked about it.
Sure. Yeah. Elizabeth had just asked if I could explain a little bit more about the way the numbers work for Fletcher House. And so the $500,000 and the $12 million are two different projects. The $12 million covers my part of the presentation. Elizabeth's only asking for $500,000. But the $500,000 this morning. So the $500,000 is the net cost to the church of the total cost of construction for Fletcher House, less what we would expect to get back from the sale of the 4 affordable units and the 2 market rate units. So roughly speaking, that is about a $5 million project by itself. Most of the money comes back in the form of sales proceeds. Now, if we sold all 8 units, then it would be totally self-funding. So the reason there's a $500,000 ask there associated with it is based on the assumption that the church keeps 2 of the units. So another way of thinking about that is that the church creates $2 million roughly of value or more for itself by spending $500,000 to retain those 2 units. Does that help? Okay.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm here on behalf of my husband, Tim Masson, and he gave me this to read. I regret I cannot be at this forum. I'm currently visiting my mother in Texas, but particularly because I served as treasurer for nearly 6 years, I wanted to express my views on the potential purposes of our 150th anniversary capital campaign. I have shared these previously with Ledlie. First, I support raising money for the proposed capital improvements to our existing facilities. These will greatly enhance the building and therefore our mission. Second, I support raising money for an endowment. We struggle to meet the budget every year. I recognize some will say we won't raise enough for the income to make a difference, but I disagree. We need to start somewhere, and there's no better time. The concept of an endowment needs to be a part of our culture. It needs to be institutionalized. As that happens, I believe it will be easier to raise significant gifts and to encourage people to include St. Columba's in their wills. Even a modest endowment can generate a small stream of income that would enhance our ability to plan a budget with confidence. Third, I have strong reservations about the proposal to construct housing units on our property. I have participated in meetings of the MPC and followed the development of this and remain very concerned. First, I'm concerned about the church going into the real estate business as developer, condo owner, or otherwise. That decision can affect our culture in negative ways, and it will be a permanent, irreversible decision. Second, I am concerned about whether the economics of the project will turn out as its proponents claim. And third, I'm concerned as to whether it's really the best way to use our resources to advance our goal of ending family homelessness. The proposal is to create affordable housing units, but in the years ahead, and as units are sold, query whether we can even legally ensure that they remain in the hands of families that we might consider deserving. I would instead prefer to tear down Fletcher House and simply make it a green space. Finally, it has been suggested that another possible purpose of a campaign is reparations. I would support some sort of racial justice initiative, but this needs to be better defined. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks for the input. And I will say just that the concerns that Tim raises in his message are important to all of us. I mean, in particular, the ongoing affordability of the units. Nobody wants to create units that would be affordable for the first owner, only to have them flip to market rate units. We're confident, based on legal advice that we've received to date, that we can ensure the ongoing affordability of those units. But clearly, there's more work to be done in terms of the economics to make sure that we have a clear and compelling financial case to support it.
Can I just add one thing to that in terms of the difference that we make? It is true that the units are not being offered at a deeply affordable rate, although the more money we raise, the more affordable we can make them. But it makes a huge difference. In our history, Ledlie alluded to the fact that we were complicit in the white people basically moved the black people out of Ward 3. And that's part of St. Columbus's history. It makes a huge difference. There are economic studies that absolutely show the difference that growing up in one neighborhood versus another neighborhood make on the future earnings of a child growing up in that neighborhood. So for us to be able to offer a place in this very high-performing neighborhood to 4 families who otherwise couldn't afford to live here makes a big difference, or will make a big difference. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to echo the concern about the long-term affordability, that when we talk about generational wealth, it is in direct competition with long-term affordability. So it is a tricky thing to thread. Not saying it can't be. One related question to that is, does the church intend to retain ownership of the land under those townhouses?
Yes, but the but is that once we sell the units the units that are sitting on top of that land, we can't do something else with the land unless we were to buy back all of the units.
Well, typically it's done with a ground lease, a 99-year ground lease, which is sort of forever and sort of not.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, there is thinking on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, and we're happy to take advantage of your expertise in this area.
Of course. No, and thank you to everyone who put so much work into it, and it really is exciting.
Yeah, so to Elizabeth, following up on Elizabeth's last point, Peter, maybe not right now, but I appreciate your comment about trying to thread that needle between with affordability and any wisdom or experience you can, so that we can thread it well, would be great. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Susanna Barnett, a longtime parishioner, and I appreciated Tim's comments because they say so much better than I could some of my concerns. But it leads to another thought that I've had, and that is that over the years we've talked about expanding the columbarium. We've talked about ways to address the nursery school needs and changes, and I might be a few steps behind. Perhaps you've already talked about this in some of your meetings, but I'm just wondering, are those plans just gone any thoughts about expanding the columbarium or doing anything more with space in the nursery school?
Lane Hurd would like to address this question.
We actually expanded the columbarium. We had another 96 niches.
Yeah.
Which,
Here, John, take this.
we expanded the columbarium by 96 niches. About 36, 38 have been sold, and so we have room in there. We have, should some point in the future need more space, we have an idea of where that can be, and this plan does not impact that whatsoever. And the nursery school space is a separate subject.
I will say we've Susanna, thank you. We have been in conversation with the nursery school, and they don't seek any further expansion at this juncture in time. They are happily maxed out at 100 students of enrollment. And as I mentioned, they are redoing the playground. One of the things that has been an ongoing concern is to have the existing elevator that drops right in the middle of the nursery school, and we would actually be solving for that. A big item on their wish list that we determined was beyond the scope of what we could do is they would love to have little bathrooms, I'm saying little because they're kid size, toilets and sinks in each room. And that's a great dream. But it stays in the dream realm.
Thank you for that, Ledlie. I agree. I mean, I understand that with the renovations to the church space. I was just thinking, I suppose in my head, I just think once that space, regardless of whatever good intention goes into that space at Fletcher House, once it's sold, it's gone. Mm-hmm. That's what I keep thinking. Then what?
Yes. And I think, responding to that and responding in part to Tim Massad's earlier comment and suggestion of simply making it a green space, that is certainly something that the Master Planning Committee contemplated. We could do that. That doesn't, our determination and the determination with the vestry was that wasn't consistent with our values and missions and making a difference and using our property for this other good. I will also say that while it isn't revealed in any of the drawings we saw here, part of the plan that's contemplated is recognizing that if you approach St. Columba's from the Butterworth side, whether you're approaching to come to the nursery school or you're approaching to come to the church, it does not look like a welcoming entrance. And some of the landscaping, we're going to retain the parking lot because the parking is essential. But given that we got a parking lot, we're also looking at, can we put sidewalk? What are other things we can do so that when you approach, and the nursery school is really eager to have us improve the sort of welcome on both sides that says, there's a great nursery school here, won't you come on in? So, thank you.
So we're about out of time. Andrew and Scott, get your questions and thoughts in.
This is an online question, not from me, it's from Reed Detchen. Was there consideration given to improvement and greater use of the undercroft?
If you've been in the undercroft anytime recently, you'll know why we laughed. We actually crawled around down there with the architects and decided, no, that place is really scary. It needs to be cleaned up, but...
Scott Craigie, a longtime parishioner. I wanted to point out that the Inflation Reduction Act has just been implemented through the EPA, and $20-some billion are available for focusing on underserved communities, bringing them into energy efficiency, and communities of worship would be included among the projects that would be covered. The DC has a green bank that would help finance this and could obtain low-interest loans to do the energy work. And I would nominate my son, who is a graduate of St. Columba's Nursery School, senior program, and everything else, Alex, as a contact on this because he's devoted his adult life to this.
Tell Scott that your nomination was seconded and approved.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Steve.